This podcast contains graphic content and may not be suitable for all listeners. Listener discretion is strongly advised.
True North True Crime is produced on the territories of the Coast Salish people.
Their heartache, their agony, their hurt is contagious. For a week now, Gerry and Barbara March have heard nothing, and they keep repeating the word with pain of their missing son, Cameron. They call him Cammy, Little Pumpkin, the little feller. He was 4 years old in March. He has blue eyes and blonde hair. 1 week. Nothing. Last night they sat together in their North Burlington home and talked about Cameron, about the past 7 days of relentless, fruitless searching, of their hope, but not of their fears. For they still have hope, and that too is contagious. Now that hundreds of searchers have combed the fields, woods, swamps, creeks, and ponds for miles around their Blind Line home, they are positive Cameron has been taken. Not by a crank, a child molester, a murderer, but by someone who wanted a 4-year-old boy belonging to someone else because he, she, or they couldn't have a child of his, her, or their own. It keeps coming to me that Cammy was taken because of love and compassion, says Mr. March. Perhaps someone who couldn't have children or whose child had died saw him and took him as a kind of substitute. I don't think it was planned. It probably just happened that way. But if that person had the love and compassion to take him, we want to ask them, beg them, to use that love and compassion again and bring Cammy back to us. That was one of the reasons the young couple, he is 32, she 29, consented to speak publicly for the first time together about their son's disappearance. They want whoever took Cammy to read this, to try to understand their agony. Whoever has him, we want to ask them to look into their hearts, feel their conscience, and give him back, says Mrs. March, who has become visibly frail and shattered by the events of the past week. She says she has been going crazy since the first moment she realized her son had gone, last Wednesday, 3 p.m. I was in the kitchen and Cameron was playing on the swings with the children in the garden next door. I could see him almost all the time from the window. A little later, I looked out and he wasn't there. At first, I didn't think anything of it. I thought all the children were playing in the garden. But then I saw the others and Cameron wasn't there. Then, and I don't know why, but then I knew something had happened. Mrs. March told of the frantic, hysterical moments which followed, calling neighbors, rushing around the area, diving into the pond in the garden next to her home. I was hysterical. I only could think he had gone. I was so scared. Cameron just isn't the kind of kid to wander away. I'm so positive he was taken. We'll get him back. We must.
What you just heard was an article written by Ian Haysom of the Hamilton Spectator that was released on Wednesday, May 14th, 1975. The devastated parents of a missing toddler were speaking out for the first time since their son went missing on the previous Wednesday, May 7th, 1975. 49 years later, almost to the day, we were lucky enough to speak with the father, Gerry March, now 80 years old. Heartbreakingly, his son is still missing, and the family is still looking for answers. Tonight, we are covering the missing persons case of 4-year-old Cameron March, and you are listening to True North True Crime.
Hello, everyone, and thanks for listening to True North True Crime. To our longtime listeners, thanks so much for your continued support. And if you're new, welcome. Don't forget to hit subscribe or follow on whichever platform you are currently listening on. As you heard in the intro of the episode, we are joined today by the father of the missing boy whose case we are covering today. Gerry March is now 80 years old and has been searching for his son for 49 long years now. Our goals for this episode are, most importantly, to provide Gerry with a platform to tell his family's story, as well as increase awareness of Cameron's disappearance, as a lot of time has gone by, and there are likely a lot of Canadians who unfortunately haven't heard his story. We also need to thank the nonprofit organization Please Bring Me Home for their assistance in not only bringing our attention to Cameron's case and introducing us to his father Gerry, but also for their incredible work in helping the family of missing people across Canada. If you haven't heard of Please Bring Me Home, their mission is to solicit anonymous tips regarding cold case missing persons across Canada. Their goal is to find the missing and bring them home to their family and friends. To date, they have assisted in locating 17 missing individuals, 2 of whom were deceased. We urge our listeners to give them a follow on Facebook. We will link their page in the show notes of this episode, and to check out the excellent work they do on their website, pleasebringmehome.com. We put today's episode together using publicly available news articles, archived news articles, with the help of the volunteers at Please Bring Me Home, and of course, with the help of Gerry March himself. Please note that this episode does deal with a missing toddler and will be discussing potential crimes against children. With that, let's go ahead and get into the disappearance of Cameron March.
This case takes place about 20 minutes outside of the city of Burlington, Ontario. Now, Burlington, Ontario is a vibrant city located in the Halton region of Canada, situated along the northwestern shores of Lake Ontario. It's part of the Greater Toronto Area and is often considered one of the best places to live in Canada. Burlington is strategically located between Toronto and Niagara Falls, making it a convenient hub for both work and leisure activities. The city is renowned for its natural beauty with scenic waterfront parks, conservation areas, and the picturesque Niagara Escarpment. Residents and visitors alike enjoy a wide range of outdoor activities, including hiking, cycling, boating, and golfing. The city's extensive trail network offers opportunities for exploration and exercise. Burlington also has a thriving arts scene and culture scene with numerous galleries, theaters, and community events showcasing local talent. Burlington's economy is pretty diverse with a mix of industries such as manufacturing, technology, healthcare, and professional services. The city also boasts a strong entrepreneurial spirit and is home to many small and medium-sized businesses. With its excellent schools, low crime rate, and abundance of recreational amenities, Burlington consistently ranks high in quality of life surveys. Now, when it comes to crime, Burlington does fairly well according to recent data. Its overall crime rate is 34% below the national average, and violent crime is 32% below the national average. But as we mentioned, though, the March family didn't live directly in Burlington. They lived in a rural area to the northeast of Burlington, again roughly about a 20-minute drive away from Burlington. The young March family lived in a residence on Blind Line Road, a residence that Gerry built himself and still stands today. The entire area surrounding their house remains fairly untouched by time today. This is due to the area being part of the Bruce Trail Conservancy. For those unaware, the Bruce Trail is both Canada's oldest and longest marked hiking trail. The main trail is more than 890 kilometers long, and there are over 400 kilometers of associated side trails. Now that we've laid out a bit of an overview of the area where today's case takes place, let's get to know the March family and more about Cameron's early life.
Cameron March was born on March 31st, 1971, to his parents Gerry and Barbara March. By 1975, when this case takes place, Cameron was 4 years old, and the family had welcomed a second son, Graham, who was only 6 months old, in May of 1975. Their residence, located on Blind Line, was situated on a rural road. The property was surrounded by modest trees, with a working farm directly opposite their home. Across Calling Road to the left lay an operational quarry called Nelson Quarry, while beside the March family resided Barbara's parents. Young Cameron frequently enjoyed visits with his grandparents, who lovingly cared for him. On May 7, 1975, Cameron's grandparents were at home. although his grandfather was resting as he had worked a night shift the day previous, and neither he nor his grandmother recalled seeing Cameron that afternoon. The March's other neighbors were a family with a 3-year-old son who was often found playing outdoors alongside Cameron. We asked Gerry to tell us about Cameron and his early life.
Well, we had the wife and I got married in 65, and Cam was born in 71. So we decided it was time to settle down and build a house. So we bought some property from my father-in-law in the country, and we proceeded to start building the house. So that's basically what it was. Working on the weekends and every night when I got home. And within a year and a half, we were able to move in. And of course, Cam, as he was growing up, he was in the house every night banging nails into the wall. He's a great little guy. Everything went well. I had a fantastic wife. I guess maybe that's why, in a long roundabout way, that you don't hear of people staying together after something like this. But and don't get me wrong, it was tough. She went mental problems like you wouldn't believe, but we worked it out. And then again, everything seemed to come together for us, if you know what I mean.
In 1975, Gerry was working for a power tool company out of Mississauga in sales, and Barbara worked part-time for a life insurance company up until Graham was born, at which point she became a stay-at-home mom to look after her 2 young sons. Here's Gerry with more about what Cameron was like as a young boy and the area where he built their house.
Well, he always a great little guy. He loved hockey. Believe it or not, he was a great skater. Loved to play hockey. We had down in the basement, we had a net set up, and he would spend hours down there just wailing away on balls. And of course, his grandfather lived next door, and him and his grandfather were buddies because he worked shifts. So when I was away, working, him and Grandpa walked around all day. If they seen Pop, their Cam was right behind them. It's kind of odd because it's never changed. I know it sounds weird, but it was basically there was 5 houses in a very close on a corner of strictly farmland, bush, and one large quarry to the south of us, but ran along the road, and that was it. Just acres and acres and acres of farmland and wide open. And the reason it's still the same is that it became part of what they call the Bruce Trail here in Ontario, and nothing was allowed to be built after that. I think there was 2 homes was all that ever went up after we left, or this happened.
The March family was living a very normal, working-class life with 2 young sons in the routine of balancing earning a living and enjoying family time at home. They were happy. But then, on May 7th, 1975, their world came to a screeching halt.
May 7th, 1975 was a Wednesday. Gerry was up early that day as he needed to head to Toronto to work at the Canadian National Exhibition grounds. Family friends had come over to visit Barbara and her 2 sons, Cameron and Graham, for lunch. These family friends left the residence around 2:30 p.m. Now, as is common with historic cases, the details from here on out get a little fuzzy. But according to the interview that Gerry and Barbara gave in the Hamilton Spectator just a week after their son went missing, Barbara remembers looking out the window of their home and seeing Cameron playing on the swings with some other neighborhood kids. But when she looked out again later, Cameron was no longer among the children playing. Now, this detail of Barbara seeing Cameron playing with other children on the swings is not among the other resources of information we were able to access for our coverage of this case. The version of events that is more widely reported is that Cameron ventured next door to the neighbor's residence to check to see if their 3-year-old son was available to play outside with him. Now, these neighbors were in the process of finishing the construction of their home, and they were living in a trailer on the property. Cameron knocked on the door and was greeted by the friend's mother, who let Cameron know that his friend was sleeping and to come back later. The neighbor states that she then saw Cameron walking back towards his own home. And this was the last time that anyone ever saw 4-year-old Cameron March. We think it's very possible that Cameron was both seen playing on the swings with the other kids, as well as going over to the neighbor's house to see if his friend wanted to come and play. And that detail of playing on the swings with other kids has maybe just been lost to time. Regardless, Barbara says that between her going downstairs to change the laundry over and coming back upstairs, Cameron disappeared. Immediately, Barbara intuitively felt that something was wrong and ran outside, frantically searching for her son. There were a few ponds in the neighboring properties, and we will be posting aerial views of the March residence and its surrounding areas so our listeners can get a better idea of the lay of the land. We'll post those on our Instagram and Facebook pages. So Barbara's first instinct was that Cameron may have ended up in one of these ponds, so she jumped into one fully clothed. And keep in mind that the water of these ponds was still very cold at the time, as it was May, early spring. So neighbors were able to hear the commotion of Barbara frantically searching for her son, and eventually people joined her in searching. Now, it's unclear who called the police, but emergency services were called within 30 minutes of Cameron going missing, and a large police and fire response descended on the residence on Blind Line Road. We asked Gerry what he remembers about May 7th, 1975, and here's what he had to say.
Well, yeah, in the morning, it was a funny night. Barbie had trouble with Graham. He was up quite a bit during the night. So, anyways, I had to get up early because I had to go to Toronto to set up the show. We're setting up a show at the CNE grounds. So I got up, and of course, as soon as anything moved in the house, Cam was right up there with me. So the two of us had breakfast together. We talked a little bit. We got some toys out for him because I explained to him that Mom was very tired because she had had a bad night. And he agreed that he would he'd be good and play there in his. We had a little room set up for him, and that's what he would do and wait for Barb and Graham to get up and get going. So, and then I, of course, give him a hug and squeeze, and that was the last of it. And then I went on to Toronto, and then back in those days, of course, there was no cell phones or anything like that. So during the afternoon when he disappeared, there was no way of getting hold of me. And I never found out anything was going on until around 5 o'clock when I got back to the office. And then I had one hell of a ride back home. So, but when I got there, it was quite the sight, of course. There was police cars, fire trucks, all kinds of people. It was just everybody running everywhere. So utter chaos. And then, of course, my wife was completely beside herself. And I found out after that she jumped into ponds and everything else trying to find them. But, and this was early May, and the guys hadn't gone out very long before. So it was cold.
We then asked Gerry if he could tell us more about Barbara's day at home that day.
Well, she got up not too long after. She was, as I say, a great lady. So, I mean, it wasn't a case of, leave one and go for the other. She was up. Of course, I can't tell you what they did in the beginning of the day. She had little things they used to do together. And then later on in the day, she couldn't go next door because Grandpa was sleeping. He had just come off a night shift. So he had to wait for Grandpa to get up. So apparently in the early afternoon, he decided that he'd like to go next door to our next door neighbor. Now, to get to the neighbors, we were all on one fence line. So it was a case of you kind of walked out in the backyard and we had a little gate and you could walk right to their trailer. And then also to the house behind us, which was on the same road going the other way. So between the four houses, you never left the gated area. So he was always now believe me, it was only a cow fence because we had cows all over behind us and everything. So, he could crawl through a hole in the cow fence. So he went to play with Michael or see about Michael. And apparently Michael was a little bit younger and he was sleeping. So Diana told him to, Mike was sleeping and that, he could come back later. So Last she seen him was heading towards the swing set, which was between their trailer and our fence. And then that was the last that they seen them. And then, of course, Barb was always looking out the back window. At that time, it was a wide open field, so you could see all. There was no obstructions, and then she couldn't see him, and there was nobody on the swings, and there was nobody there. And then that's when all hell broke loose, and she panicked and ran around, went to the trailer, and yelling and screaming, and I guess carried on. So went everywhere.
So after Gerry arrived home after rushing back from work, he came home to his house surrounded by first responders and neighbors who were aiding in the search for missing 4-year-old Cameron. This search began immediately. No time was wasted. Here's Gerry with more about the immediate aftermath and the searches that were done.
Well, that night, everybody, in fact, we searched all night. As I say, it was wide open fields, a little bit of bush down the back, strictly a farmer and a barn and everything across the road. The police and some of the neighbors that up the road farther. We walked all night long with flashlights, went through the barn, went along the edge of the quarry. The quarry itself shut down, and their entire shift, night shift and everything, which would have been hauling rock, they went through their property from one end to the other and everything else. And the days after, they even had divers come in and do their ponds. They were excellent. They sent people over to help pump out our ponds on our side of the road. I didn't have one on my property, but the neighbors did. And they pumped them dry to just make sure. And then after that, on the next day, believe me, there was literally hundreds of people, and I have no idea where they all came from. They set up grid searches about 10 feet apart, and we would walk from concession to concession, east to west, and another group would go north to south. And they would do that through each section, both ways, through the bush, through the farm fields. The OPP brought in their helicopter. They flew around. I couldn't, it was weird because some of the neighbors and neighbor ladies and stuff, don't ask me how, but somehow they managed to get all kinds of food, bread, pop, and we're making sandwiches and stuff for the searchers. I have no idea where all that came from. We had the police brought in a big trailer, which was a command post, which was there for about 3 weeks. And every morning another group of people for the first end of that week through the weekend until the Monday. And then Monday, they scaled it back to probably only 50, 60, basically off-duty police officers and a few of our friends and stuff that had time off that we could keep walking.
As you just heard from Gerry, the search efforts were immense. Not only did countless neighbors, both young and old, show up to help, some of them even called out of work and skipped their own Mother's Day celebrations to help the March family. The quarry located across the street ceased operations, and the workers also aided in looking for the missing boy. On May 8th, helicopters were deployed to assist in the search from above, and search dogs were also used, but nothing was found. Neighbors that were involved in the foot searches were interviewed by the Hamilton Spectator and said that they had heard Barbara frantic and crying and observed that she was soaking wet after searching for Cameron in a pond. They told the media that Cameron was not one to wander far from home. One of the neighbors, Erland, who was 76 years old at the time and lived across from the Marches on the working farm, says he covered about 100 acres searching for the boy and recalled that the ground was damp. He told the Hamilton Spectator that he could not figure out how a young child would get very far without notice. Now, we want to briefly touch on the neighbors who lived right next to the March residents who were in the midst of building their house and living in a trailer at the time. These were the neighbors that Cameron knocked on the door of on May 7th in search of his friend to play with. These neighbors did not assist with the search for Cameron, which may come off as a red flag for some listening. We can tell you that volunteers from Please Bring Me Home did conduct a phone interview with these neighbors back in 2022, and when asked why they did not participate in the search for Cameron, she stated that she had 2 young children at the time and her husband worked. As of 2023, these neighbors still reside on the same property. We asked Gerry about his relationship with these neighbors.
Oh, no, they were great. We were both building new homes. I would help him. He helped me. He had a tractor that I would use. I dug out my own foundation and septic and did everything. And of course, I helped him lay bricks and blocks and whatever I could. I'm not a carpenter. I'm not a contractor, but I can build. So, no, Jack and I were real good friends. We had no trouble whatsoever.
So Gerry had no issues with these neighbors and had a positive relationship with them. Turning our attention back to the searches, we want to read an excerpt from the Hamilton Spectator from May 12, 1975, titled "Volunteers by Hundreds Join Search." They came in droves, from everywhere: neighbors, scouts, firefighters, men, women, youths, and even some children. All volunteers and all for the same purpose: to help a family find a son. Some men wore suit pants. Young girls wore shorts and sleeveless blouses. Several people trudged through swamps, puddles, and water in street footwear. They were wet, scratched, dirty, and footsore, but they didn't complain. Cameron March, 4, was missing. "No words could ever be put together to say what they have done," said Gerry March on behalf of himself and his wife Barbara. "I don't think there was a leaf left in the forest that wasn't turned over. People came in with blisters as big as my feet, grabbed a bite to eat, and went out again. I just can't say enough." Another very compelling piece was put out by the Hamilton Spectator regarding the firefighters' experience while pumping the water from various ponds surrounding the March residence. The firefighter was quoted as saying, "Every time the water drains away, I've prayed and prayed he won't be there. I don't want to find him. Not like this." Anyone listening who has ever searched for a missing person, especially a missing child, knows the roller coaster of emotions that you go through when coming to terms with the grim reality of what you may find. It's a conflicting struggle between desperately wanting answers and realizing that finding them might bring bad news and a different type of grief to the family. The organized search for Cameron March that involved members of the public came to a halt on May 13, 1975, when the decision was made to call things off. Police did continue the search on their own, and the investigation was taking a different tone. The possibility that Cameron March was abducted became a real concern for police. Superintendent George Moore was quoted in the Hamilton Spectator saying the following: "As more time passes, as I have said before, we must treat the possibility that someone picked him up more seriously. When we look at the short length of time the boy was missed, his habit of playing on his own property, and the lack of clues from our mass searches in the past several days, the process of elimination sort of indicates that he was picked up." We asked Gerry what it was like for him and Barbara once the organized searches began to wane. And unfortunately, the audio is very choppy on his answer, so we're going to sum it up for you. Gerry said that he had to have somebody with Barbara all the time, as she was prescribed some pretty heavy medication to keep her grounded. He remembers sitting together with Barbara for nights on end, just talking, and grasping at straws for what to do or where to search next. They did continue searching on their own, of course, and it took over a year and a half to get to the point where Gerry felt that he could leave Barbara on her own again. Overall, he remembers this period of their lives as very tough on both of them.
As for any leads that emerged, there were numerous sightings of boys resembling Cameron, but they just didn't pan out. There were also efforts to locate owners of several vehicles that were spotted in the vicinity of the March residence. Eventually, the owner of a white and green vehicle, who was hiking the Bruce Trail on the day in question, was found and ruled out as a person of interest. Now, we wanted to hear directly from Gerry regarding his thoughts on what he believes happened to his son on May 7th, 1975.
To be honest with you, I have no idea. I know as much today as I did the day I pulled into the driveway. And I think most people are the same way. The police are baffled. It was never a case, yeah, don't get me wrong, there was a few cars, they're looking for a blue car, cream car, and they were just neighbors that were driving in and driving out, and they were all cleared, and that was it. But nobody ever seen anything. There was never somebody walking around doing something. There was one gentleman who was a school teacher, professor or something in Guelph that was walking the trail, and he was later found and, checked out and everything was fine. But he was the only person that really popped up in anything, but he had nothing to, when he went through, there was nothing there. They didn't see any cars, never seen anything, didn't see anything. The grid searches that were done the first day were done at least 3 times everywhere. And we're talking miles and miles and miles of area. Of course, everybody worries about a quarry. The quarry did not have a drop off where we were. It had the quarry or the mining had gone through, and it was a long tapered hill. And I personally, with 3 other people, walked all along on the inside of the fence. And they had been working there that day, and it was new soil, and you could see the tracks and footprints and stuff, and there was no marks that we could find that night.
Gerry has remained hopeful that his son Cameron is still alive since the moment he went missing, and remains optimistic today that his son is somewhere out there. Here's a quote from the Hamilton Spectator on Monday, May 12, 1975. Quote, "I haven't given up hope. He is still out there and they're going to find him. Somewhere he's alive. He's there and I'm not giving up. We're still going to get him back. I've got it in my mind and he's all right. And I don't know how, but I'm just going to get him back." So before we move on to where things sit in Cameron's case today and how our listeners can help Gerry and the rest of Cameron March's family, we want to bring up a case of another missing child from the North Burlington area. This suspected abduction case took place in 1967, so 8 years before Cameron vanished from Blind Line Road. 10-year-old Marianne Schuett was returning home from school on April 27, 1967, but she never made it. Her mother recalled the trauma of realizing something was wrong. She stated to the Hamilton Spectator a decade after her daughter disappeared, quote, "You never forget things like that. She never returned home from school, so I began watching the door, questioning neighbors and phoning people. I just couldn't believe that she wasn't around the next corner. For the first year, we still maintained that there was hope, but the hope slowly dies, and reality sets in. A lot of people find it hard to understand how we can go on living, not knowing. Most people feel that if we at least knew what happened, then maybe we could accept it a little bit better. I think the big thing is knowing that there is some man out there walking around who you never know when is going to strike again. Whose child is going to be next?" Now, the one major difference between Marianne's case and Cameron's case is that there were witnesses to the alleged abduction. They reported witnessing Marianne get into a dark-colored European car with a man who was described as in his 40s with a thin face and glasses. The search for Marianne was massive and was described as one of the most intensive searches ever mounted. Again, unlike Cameron's case, there was something found during the searches for Marianne: a shoe. A small, blue, denim running shoe that her parents said matched the description of the shoes that she was wearing that day. Perhaps the most interesting connection between these two missing persons cases is the fact that their houses are just an 8-minute drive away from each other. A suspect was identified in Marianne's case, but he tragically took his own life in 1991 before the authorities were able to question him or apprehend him. An article published by the Hamilton Spectator on February 16, 1991, just a month after his suicide, disclosed that the individual referred to as Mr. X had acquired a 1967 Renault 3 days before Marianne's disappearance, one of only 3 such vehicles in Ontario at that time. The article revealed that the suspect had come to the attention of law enforcement in 1972. Following the attempted abduction of a 14-year-old girl in Burlington, and further information emerged in 1990. The Hamilton Spectator reported, quote, "The police reviewed new information that Mr. X had repeatedly sexually assaulted 2 young girls over a 7-year period. Mr. X's suicide note made no mention of Marianne Schuett or any of the other victims he may have had, so any answers he may have been able to provide the families were taken with him when he took his own life.
In the years since Cameron March disappeared, there has been little movement in the investigation. This is not due to a lack of effort, but simply a lack of leads or new directions to explore. In June 2023, Please Bring Me Home partnered with Halton Regional Police and Gerry March in an effort to excavate an area of the Nelson Quarry that was closest to the March residence. This area is near the intersection of Blind Line Road and Calling Road. I want to underscore how helpful and supportive the folks at Nelson Aggregate Co. have been both immediately after Cameron went missing and recently when consultations were being done by Please Bring Me Home in order to search and excavate a part of their property. Now, the purpose of this search was to determine if Cameron accidentally lost his life or was intentionally killed on the quarry property when he went missing back in 1975. During initial discussions at the quarry in early 2023, it became evident that the quarry's landscape had undergone significant changes since 1975. At the time of Cameron's disappearance, the quarry was at road level, and Gerry remembers himself and Halton Regional Police searching this area for any signs of Cameron. The police conducted thorough searches of the quarry, focusing on bodies of water, but the theory that Cameron or his remains might have been buried by heavy machinery was not explored initially. It is worth mentioning that Cameron had never ventured toward the quarry before, and there's no indication that he did do so when he disappeared. Please Bring Me Home additionally sought consultation from a ground-penetrating radar specialist to assess the site. However, due to the quarry's status as a working area with prior earth disturbance and dense vegetation covering the terrain, GPR proved impractical in this environment. Please Bring Me Home also deployed cadaver dogs to the site to detect any potential scent, but no scent was detected in the area by the dogs. During the search in June of 2023, excavation was initiated at the junction of Blind Line and Calling Road, situated on the quarry property. However, efforts were impeded when they encountered concrete resembling a road, which obstructed further digging as machinery was unable to penetrate it. Quarry personnel explained that extensive earth movement had occurred since Cameron's disappearance, as the quarry had remained operational. Even if Cameron had met with foul play there, it's probable that his remains would have been disturbed or relocated. Please Bring Me Home lacks the necessary machinery and resources to excavate this specific area and also does not possess authorization to do so. We asked Gerry about his experience during this search that took place 48 years after the initial searches were done.
It was, I'm going to say in 50 years or 49 years, it had changed dramatically. The quarry, of course, had drawn all the overburden from farther up and brought it all down that area. And I'm going to say probably there was an extra 20 to 30 meters higher than what it was when Cam disappeared, and went literally hundreds of meters out into the quarry where they were dumping all the debris and rocks and trees and roots. Once I got there and had a look, because I had never been back in that area, and I had been by the house, don't get me wrong, but I had never been in the quarry area and really paid any attention. And it was my way of looking at it and talking to them that it was totally not possible. You'd have had to have dug down millions and millions of cubic meters to try and even get back to where the road surface was at that time. So after a morning with, and believe me, they had a lot of nice people and excavators and all kinds of stuff, but when I showed them where they had to get to and how to get to it, the excavators couldn't even get down that far of what we had there at those days. And I mean, the quarry itself was great. They brought in some of their big dozers and pushed stuff around, but it just wasn't feasible. The quarry was excellent. They were a fantastic group of people that ran the quarry. I knew them personally because, of course, I was selling to them tools and whatnot. But they also used to use our garage floor every Friday when they did the blasting, just to make sure that the world stayed together after they let her rip. But they were good. Anybody had any problems, needed this or that or gravel or whatever, the truck was there instantly. So the quarry was fantastic with the people in the area.
Due to how drastically the landscape has changed in nearly 50 years, the probability of finding Cameron, if he is indeed on quarry property, is not high. You have to keep in mind how much earth is moved around with heavy machinery and what that movement and machinery could do to human remains. We imagine this realization came as another emotional blow to both Cameron's loved ones as well as the volunteers who poured their hearts into helping aid in the excavation process. We asked Gerry where the investigation into his son's disappearance stands today.
Yes, of course, we were all together at the last spring at the quarry. I have personally not talked to Halton police this year yet. I have been in contact with Please Bring Me Home. Basically, that's been my communication that way. No, they've had 2 or 3 sergeants, and don't get me wrong, the sergeants have the detective that's working on it now has actually been up to the house, I guess, in the last 2 years about 3 times. He tried to dig through some of my the material they have there because we lost all our pictures. So he was going through that and going through boxes, and he did find a few. I did get put into their database as far as DNA. We did the big one. I also did the ancestry one as well. So, but as of yet, nothing's ever happened or heard anything on that either.
It's impossible to put into words how the ambiguous loss of a missing child impacts a family or their wider support system. But Gerry and Barbara did their best to move forward in life to ensure their youngest son, Graham, was able to grow up with some semblance of a normal life. Here's Gerry with more on how this impacted the March's other son, Graham, and their family overall.
Well, it was funny. I'm going through a little bit of health problems right now myself, and my son and I have spent a lot of time together. And I guess the easiest way to say that he got robbed of a childhood. He wasn't allowed to do lots of things where other kids could. Barbie especially would not let him out. Like, I want to go here or go there. I got to be with him or somebody, and things were tough that way, but right off the bat, as long as we could be with him and stuff, we got him into hockey when he was 4, and got him going, and that was great. But even when he was 7, 8 years old, he wasn't allowed to. On a lot of things, wasn't allowed to go unless we knew where it was, who, or had extra adults or somebody with him. So it was tough on him. In one respect, it was, I was going to say, even made Mom and I a little stronger, maybe. I know my son, of course, he has 2 children as well, and they were kind of ruled by the iron hand as well. They didn't get the chance to run and do some of the things that other people did. I think they understand now because they're a lot older, but back when they were 10, 11, 12 years old and the other kids were running around because they live in the city, they don't live in the country. So it was a little different. I'm going to say the good thing about it in a roundabout way is that we decided after, I guess, 5 years to move away from where we were and move to Perry Sound, and started another house and built another one, and of course carried on up here, and things worked out very, very well for us. I guess basically we sat down and we decided that we had to keep going for Graham, and we were always into camping and whatnot, so we used to come up this way a lot camping, and so we decided after one day that why are we driving in this traffic every weekend? Why don't we move here? This is where we want to be. So again, lots of talking, lots of this, lots of that. We decided to put the house up for sale and get a piece of property on the lake and build another home. And then after that, of course, we got involved in the community up here quite heavily. My wife ended up being a very, very good curler and traveled around Northern Ontario. Of course, she was such an outgoing person that our house was the house, if you know what I mean, on the lake.
So, as you just heard, Gerry, Barbara, and Graham did end up leaving their residence on Blind Line Road and moved to the Perry Sound region of Ontario. While we didn't ask why they made the decision to leave the residence that Cameron disappeared from, we imagine the constant reminders that the house and the area brought were difficult to deal with, and the idea of a fresh start somewhere new gave them hope for the future. We asked Gerry what it was like to return to Blind Line Road and the Nelson Quarry to search with Please Bring Me Home in 2023.
Last year would have been when we went back last spring was it was different. 2 reasons. One, I didn't want to go there again, but secondly, they were destroying my house. It was under renovations. The roof was off. They were adding pieces and doors and this. And my son went over to look at it and said that I had to come over and have a look. Well, we got inside, and the gentleman that owns it, and they were fantastic. And I explained to them that, like the fireplaces that I built and all that, the bricks and all this came out of 100-year-old, the library in town and all this. So they were very impressed and happy with what they had there. So they were good.
We understand that couples facing the disappearance of a child often struggle to navigate the emotional turmoil that it brings. However, Gerry and Barbara managed to navigate through the challenges together, demonstrating remarkable resilience in the face of adversity. Here's Gerry with more on that.
Well, I don't know. I'm nobody special. I ended up getting a very good opportunity up here, and things went well for us. The first few years were, believe me, were tough, but I guess to say to anybody else, in this kind of a situation, you just got to work it out between your family to do it. Again, I was very, very fortunate, as I keep saying, because of the lady I had, but the big fella needed her more than I did, so she had to go home. So, which was someday. The only thing I know for sure is I believe that she knows now what happened, but someday I will.
Barbara March passed away on March 18th, 2019, after a battle with cancer. Barbara and Gerry were married for 53 years. They met when they were camping outside of Kitchener, when Barbara was 15 and Gerry was 16. They got married in 1965. Camping continued to be an important part of their life, and during their travels, if Barbara ever saw a psychic sign, they would have to stop and get insight on their missing son, Cameron. To this day, Gerry March still believes that Cameron March is alive.
We asked how our listeners can help, and here's what Gerry had to say.
Well, here again, it's anybody. I mean, somebody somewhere somehow knows something. As small, a bit of information, whatever it might be, whether you, I don't know, get to, Please Bring Me Home, Crime Stoppers, the Halton Police, OPP, whatever. You can go online and you can read all the stories about them and all the rest of it, but Somewhere along the line, somebody's been in there and reading, and somebody knows something, my opinion. But as to where, how, and when, I have no idea.
This case comes with the added layer of complexity in the fact that it is a historic cold case of a missing child. But we believe, just like Gerry believes, that there has to be someone out there who knows more than they've said. Please Bring Me Home is working on an age progression photo of Cameron March that we will also be posting to our social media accounts. Please share this updated photo, this episode, and Cameron's story far and wide. Gerry has been waiting for answers as to what happened on May 7th, 1975 for nearly 50 years. It's time to bring the March family some peace of mind. Cameron March was 4 years old when he vanished from Blind Line Road outside of Burlington, Ontario on May 7, 1975. He was dressed in a white t-shirt with a green stripe around the neck and a design of climbing monkeys on the front. He was wearing brown pants, navy socks, and brown desert boots. He was 3 feet tall, 42 pounds, with blue eyes and blonde hair. One of his top teeth is discolored, and he is a white male. If you have any information on the whereabouts of Cameron March, you are asked to call the Halton Regional Police at 905-825-4777, Crime Stoppers to remain anonymous at 1-800-222-8477, or Please Bring Me Home at pleasebringmehome.com. Thank you again to Gerry March for sitting down to speak with us, for trusting us to tell your family's story, and to help spread the word about Cameron's case. To all of our listeners, thank you so much for tuning in and being active true crime consumers by sharing this episode, sharing Cameron's story and his age progression photo, and offering support to the families who participate in our episodes. We will see you again soon with a brand new episode. Until then, stay safe, everyone.
Stay safe.